Hello and welcome to Breakthroughs with Bree, where we are discussing all the topics that create extraordinary breakthroughs in our personal and spiritual development journeys. I'm Bree, otherwise known as Healing with Bree, and I'm a spiritual coach and Akashic Records channelers who helps sensitives and intuitives connect more deeply with their hearts, intuition, and souls, and teaches people how to process and alchemize the fears and beliefs that hold them back from living in their authenticity and purpose. You're in the right place if you like to hear about spirituality, psychology, healing, consciousness, manifestation, developing your spiritual and intuitive gifts, and living from your heart and soul instead of from your fears and ego. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Breakthroughs with Bree. Today we're addressing this question that I get a lot, that I've thought about myself, and I'm excited to talk about, which is, do you need to be sober to be spiritual? AKA, does imbibing in drugs or gardening or alcohol or whatever, is that bad? Does that make you bad? Does that hurt your spirituality or your spiritual practice at all? And also, how does medication, particularly mental health medication, play into your ability to tap into your spiritual gifts or your healing journey? I'm going to do a quick little podcast today going over all of that. What I will preface right at the beginning is that I am plugged into the Akashic Records, and so I am also getting their thoughts and their feedback on this. But in general, the caveat that they have is that one of the biggest problems coming into this is actually our judgment of it. So if you feel a little nervous listening to this, thinking that I'm going to harp on you, or I'm going to, have some really strong negative judgment about it, please be at ease that that is not the case, because really one of the things that the guides want to start off with this is that when we are in judgment or we feel ashamed of something, it binds us to that negative experience. It locks it into us, and it almost it shackles us to that thing, as opposed to letting experiences move through and be released and not have to be something that we feel stuck in, right? And so when we're talking about an area like this, if you find yourself feeling ashamed that maybe you need for a season or for many seasons to leverage something like mental health medication, that experience of shame and judgment is being binded in your body, especially in association with the thing that you're shaming. And it feels like there's no need for that. There's really no need for that. There can be purpose in every type of experience, including when we are not completely sober, free of medications, okay? They do want to add in some things for us to think about if we are in one of those phases where we're kind of questioning how much we really want to be engaging and, how much we want to be leveraging or imbibing in those things. But in general, it feels like they want to start by saying our judgment sometimes is a more potent poison than anything that we could physically put into our body. And there's just no need to judge. And if you do feel like there's a lot of judgment, one of the things they would say is that that probably means that you're afraid of what happens if and when people or you do imbibe. And there might be some really legitimate stuff to work through for that, especially if you've been raised or you have loved ones who have been addicted to substances, which it feels like they might touch on a little bit in this episode. But this is not the conversation about that. If you are somebody that has had sort of addictive relationships with things, I do think this episode is going to be quite useful to you. But in general, some of their advice, just take with a grain of salt, knowing yourself. So the first thing I want to touch on is medications. It's really interesting because I have had clients come into Akashic sessions, and I've heard the record keepers give kind of opposite advice when it comes to medication, particularly about mental health, particularly about anti-anxiety medication. And in full transparency, I'm coming to you from somebody who has been on mental health medication before at various points, and I feel no shame about that. I really feel like they can serve a purpose and be very helpful to your healing journey, which is in alignment with the messages that the guides have about this. But there's also times to kind of leverage caution and discernment. I've had to be on anti-depression medication, again, at different points in my life. And I suppose maybe another time I can go into an episode talking about what that decision making was for me. The very long story short was, in one case, I just needed to get through that time, and I needed a resource that was going to help me navigate and kind of get to my end goal. I was finishing college. And in another situation, I felt like I was so deep in it that, again, I needed a resource to help kind of bring me up out of it, so that my efforts I was making in my healing journey felt like they could help at all. I was just too deep in it for only my self-help things to work. Or else if I'd only relied on my self-help things, it would have taken me years, versus letting myself leverage a tool or a resource like that medication helped me feel like I got back to my baseline sooner, which is the guides want me to go into kind of their advice about one end of it. Okay. I have had clients who their body was stuck in dysregulation so deeply for so long. It's like those neural pathways run so deep. Right? I don't know if you guys have ever heard people talk about neural pathways, like when water runs through places of the earth, like the Grand Canyon, like that's a result of water moving through that and kind of carving a deeper and deeper kind of like rivet into the earth. That's how neural pathways can be, especially around anxiety and fear for safety, which is what anxiety is, right? And safety can also be represented by connection, fulfillment, stability, right? Like fear of one of those things. And if our body is so conditioned, especially from an early age, to be in a state of fear and anxiety, it's almost like if our baseline is the starting point, is like the starting line, like we are hundreds of yards away from the starting line. And when we're doing healing, we kind of got to be in the proximity of the starting line, right? So in some cases, if it feels like when you're starting to do self-healing work and trying nervous system regulation and breath work and, vagal nerve stimulating activities, and you're trying to do mindset management to really recondition thoughts and beliefs that are generating the fears, if you're doing those things and it feels like it's only helping you so much, or it's only kind of putting a dent in it, or if you can't even really get yourself to do those things in the first place because you're so depressed, because you're so anxious, that can be a signal that your body needs a little bit more support because its state is so acute, right? So that can be a situation in which more acute intervention or support can be necessary and helpful. And it feels like the guides don't want you to be ashamed of that. The resource of medication and of Western medicine and intervention is still a gift from the divine. That is still divine support. That is still a divine option, right? Sometimes in like the spiritual holistic world, we really romanticize this idea of like healing with our minds and energy and holistic nutrition and all, and stress management. And yes, that we can get to a place where that can help keep us really balanced. But like in the state of the world today, where some things are really intense and really extreme, and in some of the ways that some of y'all and some of us were raised, we do need more extensive support that is appropriate to where we're at. And that's a wonderful thing that those options are there. Please do not feel ashamed of needing to leverage them. Okay. And if you feel like you need to message somebody to be like, I'm feeling so ashamed of this, I'm just not sure if this is the right option, I give you permission to send me a DM, because like I said, I've been there and I've had so many clients talk about needing sometimes to use it or go through a period of using it and feeling so much relief, and then actually being able to apply the tools like nervous system regulation, blah, 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 and feel like it's actually making a difference. It can be a positive thing. Don't be ashamed of it. Okay. Now, on the flip side, I have also had clients who've come in, and this is in particular, if you have been on anti-anxiety medication since you were a wee child, like a babe, literally since you were 5 or 10 or 12 or 13 or even 15, 16, 17. If you have been on anti-anxiety medication that long, I get the distinct feeling in sessions that really, really affects some of the way that your physiology and your sort of cognitive processes have developed, and is impacting a little bit of how, basically impacting your field. And I don't want to be doomsday or create fear around this. You still have the ability to be healthy, you're okay. But if you're curious about it, what I've seen in sessions is there have been some people where it's so numbed out where it was even hard for me to tune into it. And it felt like that was a reflection of them not being deeply tuned into themselves. And I also think in some cases, some people go on this medication and they've literally never thought of self-introspection or spirituality, whereas other people, maybe they have had deeply spiritual kind of experiences and really dug into these parts of themselves while they're on medication. So maybe they've, balanced out some of the effects of it. And again, only you can answer this question about it. But I do feel that there's a sense of caution from the record keepers for those individuals who have been on some of these really intensive medical interventions for anxiety from very early ages. It feels like it's keeping the volume down on a really important part of yourself that wants to be communicated with. And frankly, when your relationship with that part of yourself is stronger, everything else balances out more. So like I said, it does feel like there are times and seasons when considering going on medical interventions for mental health healing can be really supportive. Don't be ashamed. But if you're one of those people that's been on it your whole life, and you're really in a healing season and you're really struggling maybe accessing energy and joy or consistency, or if you're feeling like the need to do some deeper levels of healing with anxiety or with like, again, like your purpose or whatever, like I might just think about maybe if there's a path where you intentionally try to set yourself up to wean off the medication and see how you feel. Work with your medical professionals, please. Like this is not me giving medical advice, but this is just what the Akashic Record keepers have told clients in sessions, and it feels like they want me to offer to those of you today. Set yourself up for success so that you can still be regulated and safe if you do come off some sort of medication, but also that's giving you an opportunity to interact with yourself and your body in a way that you've not before. And that can be a really beautiful thing. And frankly, that might be the answer to some of your prayers, because it does feel like these medications do like greatly influence our body, our physiology, some of our cognitive function, and on some level, our nervous system and our energetic fields, and definitely some of our subtle energetic fields that influence our experience with our intuition and all of that kind of stuff. Again, this is not me trying to fearmonger or say like, you're completely cut off from it because you've been on medication since you were 5. That's not what I'm saying. Use your own discernment here. And this is really going to resonate for people who are already kind of feeling like, I don't know that the medication is helping me for as much as it's maybe blocking me from some aspects of myself that I need to be connected to. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that there. Medication, not altogether a bad thing, can be a divine intervention and source of support. It feels like when we're on it for very long periods of time, especially through key ages of development, through like our childhood, that's when it can get a little bit more complex, and the guides really do suggest caution. Now, I'm feeling the sense if you're a parent and maybe you have a child who's on some sort of anti-anxiety medication, or you're considering it, I feel a question about that. Guides, what do you want to say about that? They're saying that this is sensitive because there's so much energy from parents about wanting to do what's right by their kids. And so they're saying that we're not going to say that there is a right or wrong answer about this. And we recognize that there are some very sensitive and deep feeling kids that are struggling navigating the world right now. I feel like the parents who would be listening to this podcast, I feel like those are the kinds of parents who are trying other things in addition to medication. And that's what kind of feels like a good sign. Okay. If you feel so overwhelmed by your child's struggle with depression or anxiety, which by the way, I get the feeling is more about them struggling with neurodiversity. Just putting it out there. If you've not looked into and really like helped them explore different types of ways that their brain might be working a little different, or their sensory experience of the world might be a little different and contributing to overwhelm, anxiety, whatever. But I feel like these parents are like looking into ways that they can help kids manage that, or looking into ways that like the way that we as a society expect children to be able to cope isn't really a fair expectation. And so really it's the expectations of what we expect these kids to handle from a stimulation standpoint and from an expectation standpoint, that's the cause of the problem, not the child, right? And they're pushing back and really trying to support their kids and teach their kids how to navigate like the way things are. And maybe in addition to that, they're really feeling like, you know, a certain period or for now that medication is going to help their kid like kind of come back into balance because they really are deeply dysregulated. Do what you got to do. Do what you got to do, especially if it's manifesting in like OCD kind of stuff for them. Like help give their little bodies a break while you're doing other things to support them. I feel like it's okay. It's okay. And at the end of the day, trust your instincts. And yeah, look into other things that can support them. Really what I'm feeling is when they feel, again, like there's a little bit of caution, is when you immediately feel overwhelmed by their anxiety or depression, and the first thing you want to do is medicate it. And that's really the only thing that you want to do. Like you're not really willing to look at, or maybe it's not that you're not willing. It's that you don't have capacity to look at your own levels of anxiety and overwhelm, and like your own capacity to like work with your own kids through their stuff. Like when you're not willing to do that, or like when you feel like you just don't have time or whatever to look into other things, that's when it feels like there's a little bit of caution, you know? But again, I feel like the people who are listening to this podcast don't really fall in that category. So if you are in the middle of making that decision, trust your instincts. If you had to make that decision before, don't judge yourself. You're doing the best you could. Okay. And take all of this, like I said, with a grain of salt. I'm not a medical professional. This is not medical advice, but this is just information for you to take and run past your own discernment. I'm going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and talk about recreational use of things and what's a really, really good, really juicy question that we can think about as we're examining our relationship to when we're sober, when we're not sober, when we're imbibing, etc., etc. Another thing that I wanted to talk about was how these things influence our ability to connect with our spiritual gifts. Okay. One of the things that I do have when you book an Akashic session with me is I just basically have a box that you check where you acknowledge that you abstaining from drugs or alcohol in the 48 hours ahead of your session does influence your ability to have like a stronger experience. It does feel like there is some truth to the fact that your field can stay a little bit stronger and clearer, particularly when you're not using alcohol. It does feel like alcohol makes our field a little bit more susceptible to other energy. Some people have described it as like, it's easier for kind of like holes in your aura or your field to happen and other energies to kind of like get in and pull. And I will say I felt a little bit of that even myself, that like when my field is feeling really strong, the boundaries of the field, the way that my energy is in my field, like I'm feeling more solid, I'm feeling more energized. And I think even the experience of the hangover is sometimes a little bit of an energetic thing. It does not prevent you from accessing your own intuition, because nothing could prevent you from accessing your own intuition. That's like a constant thing you're connected to. But I did want to address that question of like, does it influence your experience with your energetic fields and with spirit? I think yes, it does. I don't have the exact answers to all of the details of that, and this is not me creating fear or like judging you, but in the honest answer, yes, it does. Now, if you're gardening in particular, which is a phrase that's used for like when you're having a little edible or like a little smoke of something green. Okay, I don't know if I can say that on here. That also feels like it affects things, but it's a little bit different. I feel like what happens with that is you kind of get up into your upper chakras more than your lower chakras. So I feel like when you're gardening, it affects how grounded you are. So it's a little bit different in how it affects you than using alcohol. And I feel like I talked about with medication, it affects some of like the circuitry and the way that your physical body is functioning, and therefore like bringing in spiritual information, energetic information, and how you're processing that in the body. So it feels like it affects it in all different ways. Okay. I feel like when you're gardening, it might be kind of harder to be anchored into reality and therefore to bring ideas into the material world, or to kind of like be able to work in and have like clearer perception about like what is up in these upper chakras in the energetic world versus like what's happening in kind of like real life, you know? So if you're feeling kind of like you're struggling, like being really rooted and grounded in and having that clarity and all of those kinds of energies, I wonder if like participating in gardening often is impacting that, or if you're feeling like your energy is really like malleable or kind of being pulled on a lot, or if there's a lot of like up and down energy, or if there's like these like kind of extreme manifestations of things and you're drinking a lot. Again, it does feel like it affects the physical, like energetic field a little bit, and can influence like how accessible or how easy or how like grounded you feel when you are tapping into the energetic and spiritual world. Again, I'm not saying it's blocking it. But I am saying it does affect things. Okay. So I think just to answer that question in itself, it's important to be like honest with yourself about how it feels when you try. You might want to like create more cleansing rituals or more like protection rituals to kind of support you if your field is feeling a little bit vulnerable. And that can just be because it feels a little vulnerable and not having anything to do with imbibing. I don't think that being on medication inhibits spiritual gifts, but I do think it changes your experience with them. Honestly, that's what the Akashic Record Keepers are showing me. So I am going to talk more about like choice and recreational use of these things here in a second. That's like a big part of the episode, but I just wanted to take a minute to address that question of, does it affect my spiritual gifts? Yes, because it affects your connection with yourself, with like your whole embodied sober self is like one of your most balanced forms of you being able to bring in higher vibrational stuff and being able to ground it in reality. And so if you're intentionally doing something that kind of like pulls you into one extreme or the other, of course, it's going to impact how you can both bring in and ground spiritual gifts, right? Again, not that it prevents it, But of course it has an effect on it. But it's just something to keep in mind if you are curious about how that might affect it. So I'm going to take one more break, and then we're going to come into considerations for if you're trying to figure out your relationship to like recreationally participating with some of these substances. All right, we're back. I love talking about this. I love it, by the way, particularly this recreational stuff. Okay, look, I'm gonna be so real with you. I have not been entirely sober my whole life, and I'm a very spiritual person. Okay, let's just start it off with that. This is not me necessarily like encouraging or saying that like being totally sober is a bad thing, not at all. But I'm gonna be real with you. This is not coming from somebody who's like only ever been on the straight and narrow. Okay, I have heard things from all different types of people, reputable people in like the spiritual and healing and herbalistic kind of worlds, that there can be times when drinking or gardening or some other kinds of like recreational, maybe like a little mushrooms or something, can actually be really, really helpful in helping balance something that's trying to heal physically, emotionally. Okay, I'm gonna put that out there. I've heard that. It does feel like there's some truth to that. It feels like it's less common than you probably think that it would, but there can be circumstances where you getting a feeling to participate in that when you usually wouldn't can actually be like your intuition nudging you towards something, okay? I'm gonna throw that out there. But here's what I'll say for the vast majority of us, okay? Is when we are participating in something that takes us out of the state of being sober, okay? I feel like for most people, this is done out of a motivation to get out of your sober experience. Maybe that's to relax because your sober experience is stressed or tense. Maybe that's to be able to open up because you're so painfully shy or quiet or anxious when you're sober and you want to be open in a social setting. Usually I find it's around those kinds of things, even if, you know, it's shrooms or whatever. And again, this is not a judgment on any of that, okay? Just to be so clear about it, but I'm also interested in being really honest about it. I think one of the questions we can ask ourselves to see, are we intentionally, consciously interacting with these substances, or are we mindlessly using them? Are we using them as a form of escape? Are we using them as a form of coping, right? Or again, are they an intentional and conscious choice to support our path and our vision and our health? There was a period of my life where I was a wine girly, and honestly, sometimes I still am. Like, I give myself full permission for my relationship with all of these things to ebb and flow and to change all the time. Okay. But there was a period of my life where there was like a glass of wine every night, probably drinking on the weekend with my friends, occasionally gardening a little bit, where that was like a bigger part of my life. Okay. And when I reflect back on that time and what created a change for me was realizing that the reason why I was really choosing to partake was because I didn't really want to be whatever that sober version of me was. I was not able to enjoy the sober version of Brie, and I thought then a altered state would be more enjoyable. To me, that was a wake-up call, and that was a red flag in itself, because I think when we are like trying to be the most alive we can possibly be, when we're trying to be the most joyful we can possibly be, when we're trying to be the most at peace we can be and the most at love we can be, like oftentimes we find that in full contact with ourselves, with full contact with the present moment, with full contact in our body. Like that's actually where the highest potential of that is. But if we're working through healing cycles and we're working through healing trauma and all of this kind of stuff that can live in the body and can be triggered by our senses and all this kind of stuff that's in our body, you know, then we often are looking to be anything but sober, to not be with our sober self, because we don't know how to. We don't know how to work with the energy that's coming to the surface and get back to a state of feeling content or at peace or in joy or in full expression of our authenticity or intuition. Like we don't know how to get back there. And so we use substances of some sort to get to a place that feels like it's getting us closest to what we want. And it's kind of like a faux or like a substitute way of getting to a place of feeling social or feeling relaxed or feeling happy. Like it's not really the deeply fulfilling version of that. It's kind of like a counterfeit version of that, if we're being really honest. Not to say that like it's impossible to have a fun time, because you probably do have a fun time some of the time, but there's probably some times where you don't, or with how you feel afterwards, maybe doesn't feel worth the good time that you have. You know what I'm saying? And again, this isn't no judgment. This is just if we're being honest with ourselves about it. So for me, what I'll share about this was I was noticing that one, it was becoming more of a habit than a choice, which is also a red flag. We want to be able to be consciously choosing things that we're doing related to anything, especially related to things through the senses. So things that we eat, maybe exercise that we do, definitely when it comes to sex, when it comes to imbibing, right? Like all of these things that have to do with like our sensory experience. If we're doing something that's more of a habit than a choice, like it might be time to like look a little closer at that and rework so that it doesn't feel like we are craving it, which is akin to like feeling like we're kind of addicted to it, and more again that it can just be a conscious choice if we ever choose that experience for ourselves. Okay. So it was becoming a little bit more habit than choice. I was also feeling like the reason I was doing it was again to kind of escape the sober experience of myself. And I was just starting on my healing journey. And I was like, no, but like, I want to know who I am. I want to be able to experience like breathe to the fullest. I want to be able to get to a state of feeling really good in my body with who I am, even if that means I have to learn how to work through some of the stress and tension and anxiety and all of that kind of stuff. Like I want that. So why am I numbing out from that all the time? You know? And then the other thing, when I again looked at it honestly, was I was struggling with depression. That was probably my main like descriptor, symptom of what I was experiencing. And after I drank, I felt so tired. I was like fatigued. I felt a little anxious. Like it was hard to get energy for things. I felt brain fog. And here I was trying to do this healing journey so that I could feel more vital and I could feel more energy and I could feel more inspired and I could have energy that I would like apply towards all these goals and these things I had for my life. Yet I was making a choice that was like physically making me tired. It was draining me of that life force energy that I was wanting to create. Right? So again, just from this like objective look at it, like if what I want is this, like, why am I making a choice that's making that harder for myself? You know? So that was one of the things that I had to look at. And that was both true for alcohol and also a season when I was kind of like gardening, having a little gummy every now and then. It was kind of like, is this helping me feel better? Like in my life as a whole, like more than just in that moment, but like as a whole, do I like what that's contributing to my life? And the answer was no, not for the extent that I was participating in it. And I'll say, when I've been working with my guides about this particular topic, they've really encouraged me to stay away from black and white thinking about it. Because even going to the extreme of like, okay, I've noticed that maybe drinking or gardening, you know, doesn't make me feel great when I'm doing it a lot, that there's long periods of time that'll go without doing either and I'm feeling really great. Like that doesn't necessarily mean going to the extreme of stop doing it, never do it. Because that other extreme can kind of feed that craving and addiction cycle, and it reinforces the feeling that you have to be ashamed of when you did participate in it. And again, it feels like one of the most important things to think about is how can you reach a place where you feel clarity and motivation about what you want to do without shaming yourself against what you've decided not to do. Because there is a way to do that. There is a way to choose, I just like being sober better, or I like the life that I have when I imbibe less, or I see that this is actively contributing to something that's blocking me and I don't want to block myself anymore. I want to feel more ease to experience that thing that I want. Maybe it's energy, maybe it's inspiration, maybe it's connection with other people, whatever, right? Like I want to feel more ease experiencing that. And your choices become about what you want instead of avoiding what you're ashamed of. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? And it feels like that is the kind of energy that's going to help us move towards choices that are more in balance and support of our health and our heart here. Okay. So again, is there a way that you can think about or relate to this that does not involve shaming, judgment, extremes, but does involve you being honest with yourself about why you're choosing to do it in the first place, how you feel during it, how you feel after it, and how that choice is affecting your overall life experience, your overall energy levels as you move towards your goals? Because it does. They do have a physical effect on your body. That's undeniable, right? And is that effect something that plays in with the overall goals that you have for yourself, for the overall path that you're on. And with the clarity that you have from answering those questions, does that reveal to you something that you want more than the numbing? Does that reveal to you something that you're more excited about than the counterfeit good time that you might have when you drink or when you smoke or when you have a gummy? Do you know what I'm saying? I feel like what can be most motivating in like an empowering way is, again, what do I actually want more? And if you do find yourself saying, I do want like to feel good in my body. I am sick of feeling hungover. I'm sick of feeling tired. I'm sick of the anxiety, like I want to feel good, but you have a hard time like saying no in the moment to those things. Or again, you feel like it's really hard to break that habit. Then that can be a sign that maybe there's some support or healing work to sort of like unravel the knot or kind of like empty the tank of the fuel that's like fueling the habit. And that can be with a therapist, that can be with a coach. Honestly, I've also participated in like Al-Anon groups, which is like there's AA groups, and then there's groups of family members of those who have been addicted to something in some way. Like even those groups, which are free, if you find a great group, those can be incredibly supportive, right? Like there's so many different ways that you can look at like, why am I feeling so stuck on this, even though I know that this is not good for me, in a way that's filled with compassion and can lead you to feeling more free. Because what is freedom if not feeling like you can make any choice that you want to at any time, that you can act in your best interest, that you trust yourself to act in your best interest? Like what is more freedom than that? Like that's a really good feeling. So if you are here at the beginning of the year, if you're in any other part of the year and you just come to this episode, welcome. I'm so happy you're here. And you're thinking about the role that drugs or alcohol or medication plays in your experience with yourself, and therefore with spirituality. These are just some things that I wanted to share to consider. Like, do you feel like you are really happy to be in your sober self? And sober can also mean, this can also apply to things like caffeine, by the way. Whole other episode. Caffeine affecting the nervous system. Crazy. But like, we'll just stick with what we've been talking about for now. Do you like when you are in full contact with your sober self? When you're not distracted, when you're not numbed, when you can sit with the sensation of what that feels like? Do you like what you find? Do you know how to be in good relationship with that? Do you feel comfortable and safe to be in that? And do you feel like you're in full contact with what it is you really want and you want to experience? And have you taken an honest inventory about how your actions of like what you invest your energy in, as well as what you consume, and like what energy gets put into you? Like, have you done an honest inventory about how those things affect your experience, affect your energy levels, affect how you move along your path? And are you making choices based on what you really want as opposed to what you're afraid of or what you're trying to avoid? And I feel like all of those questions can directly relate to things we're imbibing in and when we're sober. And if you listen to this and you're like, Brie, I have thought about this, I am going to make some changes, but sometimes I really do feel like I want to have a drink with the girls. Go have a drink with the girls, have a drink on your date. If that feels like what you want to do, by all means. If that is a conscious choice for you, I love it for you. If you're like, sometimes I just want a garden, or hey, microdosing right now feels like it's really supporting my healing journey. It is that intervention I need actually instead of mental health medication. Girl, go off. Keep being intentional with yourself. Keep being connected with yourself. And if those choices feel like for somehow, some way, what your intuition is leading you towards to help you get to ultimately where you want to go, by all means. I don't think they have to automatically be bad. I don't think they automatically have to be good. I think when we are staying honest with ourselves and conscious about our choices, it leads us in a good place. I hope this was helpful to you. Let me know if you have any other questions about this. Again, this is a topic I really enjoy talking about. I love the nuances to it. And I also think it's really powerful how our relationship to substances that take us out of our sober experience can be mirrors back to our relationship with ourselves, and therefore with our healing journey. So with that, I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next week for more breakthroughs. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Breakthroughs with Brie. But before you go, please take a moment to either rate and review the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to it, or share this episode or maybe one of your other favorites with friends or loved ones that you think might enjoy or benefit from this content. Both of those things help more than you know, so that I can keep creating these episodes to help us all have more breakthroughs. Remember, you can connect with me on social media, sign up for my email list, hear what products, services, or events that I'm currently offering, all in the link in the show description, or by visiting my website, healingwithbrie.net. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for your support and for the time that you're taking to heal yourself and align more with your beautiful soul, as it helps us all so much more than you realize. I'll see you all next week for more breakthroughs.